From almost having the biggest fight of the year to talking trash over social media, Jon Bones Jones and the Predator, Francis Ngannou, have definitely taken their rivalry from a 0 to 100. I mean, it was almost written in the stars for them to lock horns.
Last 3 years.
I love that quote. I love it. All that muscle would have... Excuse me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
In the UFC, Francis Ngannou was cleaning up the heavyweight division, casually sending heads to space. Like, from the moment he walked the halls of the company, everyone knew he was going to be something special. Lo and behold, it was only a given that Ngannou would finally grasp the heavyweight title after brutally knocking out one of the greatest to ever do it, Stipe Miocic. Wait, did I just say greatest? Then came along a name who has been revered as the greatest, not only in his own division, but in the entire fight game. And after staying out of action for 3 years, it was time for him to step into the jungle. Johnny Bones Jones was waiting for the right opportunity to make his historic return to the playground he once owned. And you bet Dana saw the opportunity. After the Miocic fight, Dana had told the former light heavyweight champion to call him if he's actually serious about having a heavyweight clash with Ngannou. Honestly,
who's the next heavyweight championship title fight?
Yeah, I think that Jon Jones will be the next fight at heavyweight.
He's not a champion.
I know.
So who's he fighting?
Well, hopefully Francis.
even for the greatest of all time, it kind of sounds like suicide to take on the Predator. But oh, Jon was very serious, claiming he didn't gain weight for no reason. However, he insisted on waiting it out because of the whole Dana White being a little tight on the purse string. As for Ngannou himself, well, what can you say? By that point, the Predator just needed a worthy opponent, and after much negotiations, the stage was finally set for March. Well, kinda. Dana White finally pulled through, and the training camps were on. Fans were ecstatic to see Jon Jones not really bones anymore. I mean, he needed all the armory he could get to adhere to Francis's sheer strength. Everyone was counting the days in the build-up to the super fight, all until things really went south. You see, Jon Jones is rather used to having his fights canceled out on him, but that's when he's the reason behind it. Guess things are finally a-changing for Johnny Jones, because this time it was Francis who called it quits, not only from the fight, but the entire company. Negotiations, more like spats, were going on regarding Francis's contract with the UFC. Apparently, the two parties just couldn't come to a mutual consensus. Francis wanted to be paid what he deserved and freedom with his contract, which looked as though he meant he wanted to do a Conor and have some big money boxing gigs on the side. But before Johnny Jones would go to grab Dana White in a guillotine, the UFC boss offered him a contract that would have made him the highest paid heavyweight in the history of the promotion. According to him, Francis just wanted a smaller challenge. People gave the Cameroonian French stick for apparently ducking Jon Jones, but he countered by saying that he had been in hot pursuit of the match for 2 years.
If it's Francis apologizing, is there anything that could happen that could bring him back into the fold?
I'm not interested in being. I tried to make that fight for 2 years. He didn't want the fight. You know what I mean? He didn't want the fight.
He was stripped of the title, duh, and Cyril Gane had taken his place to be Jones's new dance partner. And fast forward to UFC 285, yeah, Jon Jones' impression of a GOAT's noise in his winning speech may have just summed it all up. While Ngannou was still chasing a possible Tyson Fury fight, to quote Stone Cold Steve Austin, Jon Jones arrived, raised hell, and left. After many thought something would come in the way of Jon and the title, perhaps a failed USADA test, maybe another felony, or maybe Cyril Gane's fighting prowess gave Jon a rude welcome party back to the UFC. Well, none of that happened, as Jon Jones casually submitted one of the most talented heavyweights in the UFC in the first round. I mean, the Daniel Cormier memes say it all. You can tell he was saying in his head, "not again," whilst trying to muster up a productive commentary after his bitter rival's win. The world was watching, and the GOAT was back, healthier and hungrier than before. But through all the confetti, one could only imagine what was going through the mind of the Predator. While Fury chases a bigger challenge in the unified WBO and WBC champ Alexander Usyk, Ngannou can only wait. And when you ask a lion in the jungle full of potential prey to wait, you best believe he will get irked. It is only a matter of time before he lashes out. And the lashing out came with a rather salty tweet at Jon Jones. Ngannou summed up his thoughts on the new champ in a sentence. sentence. Good job, Johnny boy. Sincerely, the heavyweight king. Oh, snap.
Right here. I don't know if you saw, but Francis tweeted, good job, Johnny boy. Sincerely, the heavyweight king. Do you have a response to Francis Ngannou referring to himself?
Francis is a big old.
Whether Dana White likes it or not, Francis left the company while still owning the belt, something he will be using over Dana White, probably for the rest of his career. Many have even called Ngannou's move a career suicide, and I kinda agree. At an individual level, Francis was peaking as a fighter. There was no one who could have stopped his winning run. The fact that the only fight that made sense was for him to face Jones is a testimony to that. Though, from a broader perspective, yes, he did actually blow a whistle for all those fighters who feel that they are underpaid. But philanthropy aside, they are fighters in the end. Bottom line, there is a new champ in town, and you best believe it must be rubbing Francis the wrong way just looking at John's charming smile with a belt he once wore around his shoulder. As for Jon Jones, during the post-fight interview, a reporter passed Ngannou's message along, to which he replied by calling Francis something that should really be meaning a more than average size feline. He mocked Francis, calling out his enormous frame, which was for nothing. At the end of the day, all that's left is trash talk, when we should have really been watching the two settling the beef the only way they know how. Ngannou did commend Jones's performance on his YouTube channel, giving his reaction to the fight. But all I'm thinking right now is, what would have happened if the fight did pull through? This is a debate that had, and maybe always will keep analysts guessing, coming up with their best theory for the outcome of the fight. Francis is a menace, which goes without being said. But when it comes to the sheer tenacity, experience, and performance on the big stage, it's pretty much a no-brainer that Jon would have the last laugh. When speaking to Steve-O on his podcast, Jon broke down the Ngannou stigma in just a few minutes. He went on to say that yes, Francis is a dangerous fighter, and when thinking about going into the octagon against him would be a daunting thought. But how to overcome him? Well, get used to the idea of him knocking out, and everything else just becomes easy. That's right, just like that. Jon just described his game plan to defeat the scariest fighter in the UFC, and just by the calmness in his voice and the level of intellect he speaks with, you knew how the fight would have gone. Jon would have wrestled Ngannou till his arms gave out, and after that, well, that's for the GOAT to decide what he wants to do with him. See, you can't really compare Jon with anyone right now, because he's just too special. It's not because Ngannou is a bad fighter, it's just that Jones is unstoppable. However, it is nothing less than a tragedy that we may never get to see the fight pull through ever. Well, at least in the UFC. As for Jon Jones, he can have him any day, anytime. For the build-up to the fight, he'll surely be practicing his GOAT impression in the camp for the inevitable. And that was how Jon Jones really feels about Francis Ngannou.